if you know this, but I work with a guy named Producer Drew, and he is a fan of the Colorado Avalanche. And every so often, he bugs me to make a specific video, and I'm finally caving and doing it. And it results in a team winning a Stanley Cup. And it's not the Colorado Avalanche. Well, they might too. This is the Ryan O'Reilly trade tree. Let me take you back to the 2009 NHL entry draft because I remember it as being one that was particularly amazing for the Colorado Avalanche. And I had a particular affinity for this draft because that was the first year that I sort of worked in the business and I covered junior. And when I saw the first 4 picks that Colorado made, I thought they were going to be a dynasty. They had the 3rd overall pick, 33rd overall, 49th, and 64th overall picks. 3rd overall was Matt Duchene, 33rd was Ryan O'Reilly, 49th was Stephen Elliott, and 64th was Tyson Barrie. Now, Stephen Elliott was a highly touted guy at the time. He only played 87 NHL games, but that's a lot more than most of us have played. Tyson Barrie played many games for the Colorado Avalanche and then fetched a pretty penny when he was traded for Nazem Kadri. We haven't even done that trade tree yet. Matt Duchene, on the other hand, we have done that trade tree, and it's enormous, and even though his tenure in Colorado didn't end very well, oh, did they get a lot for that fella. Then at 33rd overall, there's Ryan O'Reilly, and we're doing his trade tree right now. June of 2015, it happens. The Colorado Avalanche trade Ryan O'Reilly to the Buffalo Sabres. A few things should be noted here. 1, in June 2015, the Buffalo Sabres had just drafted Jack Eichel 2nd overall in the NHL draft. Also worthy of note, the Sabres picked 2nd overall in that draft, and the reason they did is because they stunk! What amazed me about the size of this trade tree is I couldn't believe Buffalo had anybody left after the 2014-15 season. They sold and then they took the players they got in trades and they sold them as well. They were trying to be bad. They're the reason why there's so many lottery picks right now. I mean, geez, they weren't the only ones. The Oilers were doing it, the Coyotes were doing it, the Leafs were doing it, but nobody did it quite like the 2014-15 Buffalo Sabres. But they looked to be turning it around like that because they had a young Jack Eichel and they were going to support him with Ryan O'Reilly. Here's the trade. The Colorado Avalanche acquire forward Mikhail Grigorenko, defenseman Nikita Zadorov, forward JT Compher, and a 2nd round pick in 2015, which was 31st overall. Going the other way, the Buffalo Sabres acquire Jamie McGinn and Ryan O'Reilly. To give you an idea of where this trade tree is going, both Zadorov and Compher played more games with the Avalanche than O'Reilly did with the Sabres. But we're also going to do O'Reilly last because I think he deserves it, and you'll see why later. We'll start on the Colorado Avalanche side of things, and we'll take a look at Mikhail Grigorenko. Maybe the easiest one of the deal. Grigorenko was once talked about as like a potential top 5 guy in the 2012 draft, but he ended up falling to the Buffalo Sabres at number 12. And by his 3rd season with the team, he had a career high of 3 goals, and they said, oh. During the 2014-15 season, he actually did have good numbers in the American League with 36 points in 43 games, but the Sabres decided to part ways anyway. Grigorenko's name has been around the NHL for so long that I was actually shocked to find that the team he played the most NHL games with was the Colorado Avalanche at 149 games. I had forgotten that eventually he left for the KHL for 3 full seasons, and yeah, that ought to do it. He had 50 points in his 149 games with Colorado. Not terrible, but not overwhelming either, and then he left for the KHL. That's that. As in, that branch is over. He wasn't traded for anyone, nothing, so we can move on. And how about we move on to the other Russian involved in that deal, Nikita Zadorov, and he was traded for something relatively recently, but let's talk about his time in Colorado first. 289 games played with the Avalanche, which is not nothing, and I keep bringing it up in the trade trees because games of service are important. Sure, you'd like Rocket Richards and Art Rosses and Hart Trophies and Norrises and Vezinas and all of that, but at the end of the day, you need hockey players on your hockey team. And if you acquire a player who plays nearly 300 games for your organization, typically, in these trade trees, in my experience, that's pretty good. In those 289 games, Zadorov had 18 goals and 59 points, but who cares about any of that? He was there to ruin your day with a big hit. And he laid many of those for the Colorado Avalanche organization until he was dealt just last year. Joe Sakic and the Avalanche packaged Zadorov with Anton Lindholm and sent them to the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for Brandon Saad, and Dennis Gilbert. First of all, the name Brandon Saad just gives me anxiety when it comes to these trade trees because he's involved in so many and they're so confusing. Because he keeps getting traded back to and away from the Blackhawks, and I half expect it to happen in this trade tree, but I'm here to tell you, it doesn't. Who knows? Maybe Saad will get traded back to the Blackhawks after I film this, and then I'll quit trade trees and move to the woods. Anyway, Saad, in his one season with the Avalanche, pretty good. In 44 games, he had 24 points, not mind-blowing, but 15 goals. That is pretty good. But in 10 playoff games for the Avalanche, he had 8 points. That is good. And 7 goals. That's unreal. That's another thing that we come across in these trade trees. Yeah, regular season stats are great, but when you perform like that in the playoffs, it's a huge win. Dennis Gilbert, he's much easier. He's only played 3 games with the Colorado Avalanche so far, played most of his time in the AHL. We'll see how that develops. For now, that branch is done. We move on to JT Compher. Now, Compher was actually a second-round pick from 2013, just 2 drafts from before this trade happened. So he was actually like futures in this deal. He was the hot prospect. And I guess you figured out that Zadorov was one of the players who has played more games for the Avalanche than O'Reilly did for the Sabres. Compher is the other. In his 271 career games with the Avalanche, he has 53 goals, 56 assists for 109 points. And then he was traded for nobody. He's actually still on the Colorado Avalanche and has another 2 years left on his contract. And just to turn the knife a little bit on the Buffalo Sabres before we even get to their half of the tree, Grigorenko and Zadorov and Compher combined have scored more points for the Colorado Avalanche than O'Reilly did for the Sabres. But the most interesting part of the Avalanche's half of this trade tree to me is the second round pick, because I couldn't believe it when I saw it. Because remember, this is the 31st overall pick. Right now, the 31st overall pick is in the first round. Back in 2015, it wasn't. It was still a second, but a very good second. The Colorado Avalanche managed to trade the 31st overall pick in 2015 for a second rounder in 2015, that was 39th overall, a second rounder in 2016, and a 6th round pick in 2017. The Sharks paid 2 seconds and a 6th for another second? The second round pick in 2016 ended up being 40th overall, so the Sharks basically traded the 39th pick, the 40th pick, and a 6th for the 31st pick, which that is wild value for the Colorado Avalanche. You might be wondering who the Sharks picked with the 31st pick. It was a defenseman named Jeremy Waugh, who 6 years later has yet to play an NHL game. Who knows? Might be great, but he hasn't yet. And I'd love to jazz this up, but the Avalanche actually got a whole lot of magic beans as well. With the 39th pick in 2015, the Avalanche draft AJ Greer. He played 37 games for them, and then they traded him to the New York Islanders in exchange for Kyle Burroughs, who played 5 games for them and had 1 assist. That's it. With the second rounder they got in 2016, that's the 40th overall pick that year, the Avalanche got a guy named Cameron Morrison. Now, he hasn't played any NHL games either, but this is going to be a thing that I think I'm going to say more and more often in trade tree videos. He went to college, and then once he graduated college, it was a pandemic. This is gonna suck for like guys from the 2016 draft, 17, 18, guys who are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go the long route, I'm gonna go to college, and then I'll start playing professional hockey. And then when they graduate, there's barely any professional hockey to be played. The 6th round pick from 2017, same deal actually. Dennis Smirnov, again, college and then pandemic. So right now, that branch and the Colorado Avalanche's side of the trade tree is done, but I'm not ready to say done, like they're not going to get anything else out of it. There are several prospects, guys under contract still. This trade tree is still going. And the fact that this trade tree can keep going should be some comfort to Buffalo Sabres fans, because this is about to be bad. The Jamie McGinn branch of this trade tree is a tricky one. Try to keep up. So, Buffalo had Jamie McGinn. Then they traded him to Anaheim for a 3rd round pick. They flipped that 3rd round pick to the Nashville Predators for Jimmy Vesey, but it was actually Jimmy Vesey's rights. You might remember Vesey opted not to stay in Buffalo. He signed with the Rangers as a free agent, so this part of the trade tree is done, even though Vesey would later go on to become a member of the Buffalo Sabres after they traded for him with the Rangers. Then there's Ryan O'Reilly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I should say, Ryan O'Reilly was a great member of the Buffalo Sabres. In his 224 games with the organization, he had 65 goals, 111 assists, and 176 points, which is great for a defensively minded forward. He regularly got Selke votes as a member of the Sabres. But Sabres fans might not look back on that time with fondness because while Ryan O'Reilly was good individually, wow, did that team stink! There are bad streaks in the National Hockey League, teams that haven't won a playoff round for a long time, haven't won a Stanley Cup for a long time. The Buffalo Sabres have not made the playoffs in a long time, and since this initial deal, they haven't come close, like, at all. And so, O'Reilly was traded to the St. Louis Blues. Before we get to what the Sabres got, what O'Reilly said on the way out was profound, like profoundly concerning if you're a fan of the Buffalo Sabres. Like, he was talking about losing his love for hockey. Then in his first season with the St. Louis Blues, after leaving Buffalo, O'Reilly wins the Selke Trophy as the best defensive forward in the NHL in the regular season. He wins the Stanley Cup, and he wins the Conn Smythe as the playoff MVP. I should also mention that it keeps going. He was nominated for the Selke the very next year in 2020, and this past season, he was 5th in Selke voting as well. For a player that good, you better get something in return. Well, they did get a lot. Did it work out for the Buffalo Sabres? Buffalo got Patrick Berglund, Vladimir Sobotka, Tage Thompson, a first-round pick in 2019, and a second-rounder in 2021. We'll start with Patrick Berglund, and he's a difficult one to talk about. He only played 23 games with the Sabres organization, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, and then he retired. And his retirement really meant something because most NHL players don't retire until they're paid all the money that they're owed. Berglund's contract still had over $13 million left on it. Berglund's contract that he signed with the St. Louis Blues actually had a 20-team no-trade list in years 2 and 3 of the deal. However, and I'm reading directly from a Chris Johnston article from Sportsnet.ca from 2019, that clause was voided when Berglund failed to provide the list of teams before the set deadline. So July 1st, 2018, the trade happens. The article also mentions that Berglund made over $30 million in his NHL career, and he knows exactly how much he was owed, and he didn't fight for any of it. And at the end of the article, he's also quoted as saying, "I don't know how much money you need to be happy, but I'm good." He was obviously unhappy, and he did what was best for him. It's his life to live. If you'd like to read that article in its entirety, it's from November 30th, 2019 by Chris Johnston on Sportsnet.ca, and it's called Why Patrick Berglund's Decision to Walk Away from NHL Was No Decision at All. For the purposes of this video, that part of the trade tree is done. Moving on to Vladimir Sobotka, 85 games with the Buffalo Sabres, 16 points, and that's it. And he didn't play in the NHL this past season either, and his part of the trade tree is done. Yeah, it's usually not good when it's quick in these videos. Next is Tage Thompson, and he's a complicated one, I think. This big, once highly touted prospect has played 104 games for the Buffalo Sabres and scored 15 goals and 26 points. Now, you know what? Players have scored a lot less in the NHL. You could do worse than that. He was supposed to be like the young hotshot in this deal, the real sweetener, the why are the Blues giving this guy up? He'll be 24 when the season begins. There is lots of career left for Tage Thompson to play, but as of right now, he hasn't been a huge impact player for the Buffalo Sabres. Now we go into the unknown. The first round pick in 2019 that the St. Louis Blues gave to the Buffalo Sabres is 31st overall because the St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup. It's the worst first you could possibly have. With that pick, the Sabres selected defenseman Ryan Johnson. Now, no, he has not played in the NHL yet, but keep in mind, defensemen take longer to develop, and also he was only drafted in 2019. This past season at the University of Minnesota, the defenseman had 14 points in 27 games. That's not bad. It's way, way, way too early to write off that part of the trade tree. Way too early. The tale of the second rounder that the Buffalo Sabres got from the St. Louis Blues is actually pretty quick and easy. They packaged it along with a 2022 fifth rounder and sent it to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for defenseman Colin Miller, who has played 99 games for the Sabres, but has been in and out of the lineup as a healthy scratch. So, that is actually it for this trade tree so far. It's obviously going to evolve. There are too many young players who haven't played in the NHL yet, to declare a clear winner or a clear loser. If you ask me, the clear winner is the St. Louis Blues. And it's funny, I was just saying to myself, oh, I wonder what the St. Louis trade tree would look like in all this. And all they got was Ryan O'Reilly, and he won the Cup in Conn Smythe and Selke. I think they're just fine with the return that they got. Thank you very much. I know some Sabres fans look back on this trade with disdain, and I think a lot of that has to do with how it worked out with the Blues, obviously, and also the success that the Sabres had under O'Reilly. Maybe the lack thereof. I will say this, though. Even though Buffalo hasn't gotten an impact player from this trade tree yet, it is good, typically, in my experience doing these videos, that a trade tree continues 6 years onward. Heck, they managed to get a first rounder who was only picked 2 years ago, and a second and a third from this draft in 2021. They got a long way to go to make this one a banger, but it's not the complete failure that I've seen it painted as. Not even close. And as for the Avalanche, what did they really get? There are some prospects who could be good for them, we don't know yet. But other than Brandon Saad and his really good and really brief playoff performance for the Avalanche, they got some guys who have played a lot of games for the organization, but no one to really blow you away. They certainly didn't get a Ryan O'Reilly. So this will continue, and maybe there will be an update someday, but for now, that is it for this trade tree. As always, leave a comment in the comment box down below. What did you think of this trade tree video, and who do you think won? And who do you think will win? For now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. This one's not over.